Hola, ¿cómo estás? Okay, the center correlation setting attractions and high center interference in position operation system is now in completion. Now, completion line calculation setting. Oh, well, when it comes into Chris modifications, he's right. Simulation 1 is finished. Now, the finish line screen interference puts position lines of travel in geometric line operation line scales. That's position locations. Pay attention now. Correlation lines of track lines, your set location lines, comes out of the zeros and ones of track location of pixelation graph calculations in your modification system, interpretation lines of coloration. Changes correlation line calculations and they put you into pixel screens like Minecraft and set locations, computerized and digital like communication screen locations. Getting you out of pixelation screen lines puts you in a hologram. Hologram puts you in a line communication setting to your face direction time sequence. It's all levels of you in track locations. So the line settings of March 1st puts everybody in the line position locations to a print that positioned its panels in the correlated line centers of track locations, putting levels on higher levels of consciousness and where you are in the mind of perception. Okay, this is where it puts allocated elongated line screens and high interference into information location in your panels. And this allocates position timeline sequence. T reception lines of screen location settings. Know exactly what's going on in the location systems, location line connections, all through your inner child. What your inner child has been processing through is a TV reception line of a screen. For example, that sets lines of core line interference, inner child communications, and position. All right, track line conditions. All right. Setting correlation lines, high track line conditions, all levels. Set positions, calculation, stream interference, indirect signals. Modification, screen interference, and child position of point centers. TV reception and correlation. Okay, so TV lines, pixelations, graph communication screens, and set position. Okay, TV reception line setting, strip location, flux capacitor, laser communication. Okay, all your position of time center. Each pixel line graph goes into the mind section of connections. 1, 2, and 3 track connections. Okay, the allocated position time sequence puts lines of panels into 1, 2, 3, and 4 site locations. Changing all lines of communication, energy lines, grid lines, formation lines, plasma generation, screen location, plasma intergeneral line communication lines, dimension lines of space and time location. Okay, so getting in that track line condition system is understanding the T reception line of screen locations adaptation, high force lines of communication lines of panels, direct modification screen lines and high adaptation surface, and travel and position line centers and how the inner child sees through eye perception. Okay, correlation of track lines. So setting lines of high center interference, putting reverberation channels back in conscious location system in track locations. Open all signal lines, communication, the pixelation, graph calculation, point lines, attractions. Over lines, the position lines of centric communications, and the program line units in all levels in track location. Okay, platitude screens, high travels. Sets lines of communication graph lines. Now the point lines of tracks. Energize the communication lines of pi in setting. Sonar communications, 1, 2, 3, and 4 set locations. All right. Modifies correlation settings, calculates elongated 1, 2, 3, and 4 of panel communication. Direct lines of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, and 12 set location. And traction. Okay. Now, lacing line communications crosses line signals and positional panels, crosses communication interference and positional lines, pixelation graph correlation setting attraction. Done by equation. Now, center communication line screens, guys, is all about understanding how to see yourself through T reception line inside through track locations. This measures accountability in line screens, line how you see through a T reception line screen, puts you in levels in high calculation system and track locations. All levels of channel communications of programs and line signals into motivation and track location. Okay. So this is what the team's coming into in track lines. Okay, know exactly how to set position on graph line communication screens, open up dimension line scales, balance lines, formation lines, correlates in track lines, division line screen interference in position of probe location setting, Open all signals, panels, correlation settings, stargates, star panels, star maps, sequence location system of pixelation graph calculations, interactions. Welcome to the pixelation graph world and setting your travels. Okay, auto modification. All right. So in this center communication comes in a line setting. Okay, track locations, road graph, and 3 center communication settings and travels, 3-point track locations. So the road graph calculation lines. So the actual line communication line set is March 1st. You're going to get up and set position travel here. You're going to start here and travel in position of the TV setting. Okay, you're going to start here and you're going to line signal and graph locations and setting and travel. Okay, so that modifies the correlation setting track lines, open all signal lines communication to its program in a T reception line correlation screen interference into pixelation graph lines of holographic set location setting into OLOs, altitude line screens. So in that track lines coming in settings, it comes into more in communication streamlines and direct signals and modification. Okay. All right. So this is a pixel line connection all through room center line coordination and track lines. So going through line communications lines, position of panels, center correlation settings of realms. Okay. See the portal? Portal communication lines. You have to get in direct signal exactly what you're doing with the pixelation graph calculation line system of all lines of Earth and space. Remember, I told you about space discoveries and the clock location system, travel line centers, in setting, position to its calculation of ground lines, operation, service, clock location system, and travel. Okay? Grounds, panels, ceiling. Very powerful stuff. All through pixelation graphs and correlation setting interactions. Okay? Getting you guys ready to understand position location of sonars when you get in position your ear lines, in position your eye lines, in position your cerebro, in correlation setting attractions, in location of your templates, in position location your line settings, in position location your track locations, in communication your heart line time sequence, in line communications to its setting. Okay. Pixelation graphs of panels, setting lines of ceiling, position of grounds. Now, getting correlation setting attractions, all levels of crop circle and line communication of center calculations. Okay, very complicated stuff, right? All right. And so get into that track to its communication line surface. You understand each pixel line, screen line is a T receptor line that puts position your truth narratives and your false narratives in set locations. Pointing lines of point lines of tracks in a box location, right? Setting, calculation, setting into a mainframe. This is a mainframe. Mainframe, box frame, telegraphing frame. Okay, correlation frame, direct frame, set connections mainframe. Okay, so it's really understanding the box line rotation centers in a 4-track location. Direct modification lines in 0, 0, and 0, and 0, and 4 set locations. Triangulation reset position of programs and line setting locations of molecules. Travel correlation setting of track lines. All levels of transit and communications. Remember the transit? Inset, location, expansion, and setting. Platform communication lines of platform 1 in position, platform 2 in transit, and platform 3 in teleportation. Inset, location, and setting. Okay, so it's very complicated stuff, guys. Very complicated. All right, so getting that correlation setting, you have a position lines of center and track communications. This is what your cerebral is going to look like in correlation setting and track communication. All right, it's going to look like that. It's going to have dimensional doors in each line communication, starting off 4 panels and track line connections. Okay, all through modifications. Okay. So putting this all together, guys, is extremely powerful. How you get in your position line centers. It's that location of travel. Okay. So you come into this line screen first. Then in setting calculation line screen interference, your plasma streamlines change correlation setting attractions. Remember how we went into position of 0 line and position line calculation setting, calculation line interference into 1, 2, 3, set location of false, sets lines of truth, and position of false. Okay, 0 operation line calculation setting alpha, alpha equals lines of alpha on position location. Operation line centers into beta. You can have beta lines, but use it as a reference and set location. Okay, so there's all calculate, modify how you come in your timeline sequence. Now this gets you in a better communication because Friday, you have to create a solar sail in track line conditions, right? Direct modification lines of high center interference. So you got position of false, truth, false, right? Sets position lines of 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 line settings, traffic calculation and formation. Sets lines of calculation line interference, and the truth is 1, 2, and 3. 4 lines of setting equals lines of 7 in traffication right away. Sets lines of false, narrative, position of 3 track locations in system. Okay, 4 lines of tracks, 4 lines equals lines of 0. Okay, allocates position lines equals 3 in set location. Allocates timelines. We take the 4 line signal, line condition of 0 and position of 3 settings. Position lines is balanced in correlation setting to its 8 track line conditions of 4 settings. Allocate time streams and high center interference in direction system of modification. Triangulate the center point line centers and all lines of high center interference in position location of the center. Modificates center line interference in zero gravity line position locations and center correlation setting of track lines in position to its calculation. Done by equation. Okay, very powerful stuff. All right, so that's all you're doing is you're creating models of levels of teleportation screens, directing lines of pixelation graph lines, getting correlates and track lines, putting the pieces and puzzles together as a connection setting to a pixel screen graph. It's triangulation reset position for programs, how you start to see lines of perception now, all through pixelation. So the correlation track lines, high centers is position lines of operation, certification, setting, and travel. Okay. So in that line calculation setting, in position location, you have the center correlation. Okay, and you got dimensional doors or round line signals. Okay, all through calculations, right? All dimensional door lines. Okay, and then you got an energetic dome. Okay, the correlation setting track lines. Now each dimensional line door has a platform correlation track lines in 3 settings, right? In, out, and audio. Always has a track lines in a 4-track location system. Okay, now track lines of high center interference, you can get downshift cross line screen line settings. This is where you put in the higher levels of platform of communication setting to travel. Modification system right over left, left over right. Crosses line streams and platforms in a 3-track location. Modificates signals lines at pixelation graph calculation to 1 line setting into pi of recognition. Sonar correlation split the pi position travels. Positions of platforms and line setting high calculation stream interference in track location system as center calculation. Now, in that line of center line interference, into light signal location, you have the X3000s coming in traction. Positions of platforms, 1 dimension line screen, dimension line centers of 2, dimension line centers of 3, dimension line centers of 4, dimension line centers of 5, and dimension line centers of 6 in set location. Okay? And so it's really understanding how it comes in line settings. Each platform has it indicated in line screen, multiple levels and channels. The communication lines of point line system is your SIM that changes platforms of communication setting. As particle lines of acceleration screen settings into jump start position of pixelation graphs. So they allocate position of timelines, put the team centers line interference and pixelation lines, put them in dimensional walls, ground lines, 2 panels, and ceiling locations. Done. You guys are going through that line communication now. You understand the center correlation setting at high position is center calculation screen lines at high position is calculation position of program. All right. Directing all communication line screens in your system of Astra projections. Okay. All through center calculation. All right. So understanding more lines of grids and position of programs, it's line connection in your settings. Understanding line connections all levels in your set location when it comes into your earth line. Because your earth line is changing pixelation graph line communications in 3 settings, right? Panda correlation lines and 3 track lines of rainbow graph calculations. Position lines calculation line interference in your positions to your ethereal. Multi levels of division line screen lines adaptation surface into a holographic set location. Okay, all to modification line screens in high setting. Position lines attractions into 3 set locations. Traffic calculation of 4 track line connections. in the settings in position on the center lines in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11 and 12 set location. Puts all line centers of pi in correlation and attractions. Direct modification center lines, all lines of all communication setting and position line centers in position locations in all track locations of face recognition. Very powerful stuff. Okay. Your correlation track lines and high direct signals is coming into line setting locations of face recognition lines of pixelation graph calculations. All right. So modifiers into space modulators, directing lines of communication system and travel. So what's going on? SB is basically very high line communications. The team is coming into another line connection setting. So they're set location. This what is interactions. Let's go modification line screen and position, right? So center correlation setting attractions. This is them. Okay, going through here. Set calculations, direct line calculation setting. So then they're in the center now. Simulation 1, simulation 2, okay, and simulation 3. And set locations. Okay, so they're leaving here, they're coming in here, and they're going in here. So it's kind of like in, out, in position, location, audio line, screen. 3 track line provisions in 3 settings, 3 track line connection settings in 4 settings, in track locations into systematic line communication of existence and set location. Okay, so they go through the pixelation graphs and data, files, and correlation setting attractions over space and time. Okay, so in position lines, input, output, exit, input, output, exit. Okay, so they're in the center core of pixelation graphs now in line communication setting in position to its operation. That's where they are right now. In position March 1st. Okay, that puts them in the center core tractions into their cerebro of their energetic dome in line communications as program. Okay, so splitting anomalies and a track line in position to its operation service, guys, is really understanding the positions of backdrop and forward. Pseudo correlation line centers, they have to understand their structure as designed first of their calculations to their sim. So when they come in out of line connection to exit, they start existing in the set locations. The actual panel disappears. And when it disappears, the center correlation line calculation settings, once they get into the macro, the center position travel lines, they'll be in a full formation system of freedom at set location without panels and all track location. Okay? Freedom. All right, so they're in this line connection center now. Pixelation graph gets in the existence, then they come into line calculation setting. Now this positions their tractions. Center lines is coordinate setting travel and direct signal, all through set locations. They automatically come into a formation line screen, directing lines to panels into higher position of travel communication. All right, a hologram. They turn in position to a hologram out of alignment in screen location setting adaptation. Travel position of the point centers all through line connection setting of superhuman line communication of center identification. Okay? So, out of the pixelation graph and in position, then they can go through anything through portal communication, anything through grounds, powers, lines of the atmosphere location center, and travel. Point lines of tracks, point lines of division, point lines of panels, and point lines of ceiling and 3 set location. Okay, so it can choose wherever it wants to go. And a 24, and a 48, and a 72, and a 144 platform and grid location. All right, center correlation setting attractions puts them into line settings, all levels of track location. Okay, direct modification on that 3 line centers into crop circle locations settings of platform and communication setting and track locations to their cerebro into dimensional lines of scales and balanced position. Center correlating line center line interference puts them in another platform communications in setting. Okay, into another platform in communication, 3 lines, 4 track location. Direct modifications, another platform. Here's the dimensional door that they go through in track location. Okay, that's where they're coming into. Setting a correlation line track lines, guys, is really to understand through you and how you come in all line centers, inline communication, your settings and travel. Okay, we already got in that correlation setting when you go through lights, all through graph calculation, your stargates and star systems, this application is setting, all through platforms and communications. Now, the correlation track lines in your cerebral cortex line divisions is going to be diverted. The center correlation line center interference is going to direct and redirect rotations to your binaries in position line calculation setting. No more lines of communication non-binary. Binary correlation setting interaction lines, pixelation graph correlation settings coming into the holographic set locations in its settings. All right. Travels and line rotation centers and track locations. Sending travel communication, all center line communications into 5 wires of channels and line condition system and program locations. Tethered in 5 atmospheres. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. Travel 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 set locations. Once they get a modification of platforms and they get a higher communication lines of travels, then they can go with the higher line setting high interference and release each panel of correlation lines of tractions. So offline tether, position of 5 in set location lines. That's lines of high calculation lines of positive, line condition negative. Sets communication lines of positive, positive, positive. 3 track line connection settings. Puts position line center interference into position of truth, truth, truth. Sets correlation lines, equal line communication line centers into false narrative, coloration path, color the half line center and position travel and its point system and travel calculations. Okay? So direct modification lines of a location grid, direct modifications security line defense line, and direct signals and modification cycles. Tracking's correlation setting high calculation line system into higher levels into levitation graphs and center correlation settings in pi attraction. Zonal line communication lines centers and high position locations. Platitude their division lines and higher lines of communications. Direct modification lines and high travel positions out of structure, out of design, and in position location of existence and all travels of mechanism line connections. Down by equation. From this to that. So they will no longer be tethered, but they have to be in the macro. Okay, so the alpha line communication sets lines of tractions. Box line rotations, center correlations, alpha, omega, micro, macro. Right, correlation, setting, and triangulation, right? Split denominators into 4 track locations. All right, so that's 4 provisions, 3 lines of cycles, high calculation line system, into your compute system. All right, so in that line center interference, the microcorrelation setting track lines will put them on higher lines of the kaleidoscope communication of setting. High correlated lines have their sun and track location high center and hidden position location to its operation location setting of all communication line settings of face recognition. All right. So directing modification lines of perceptions over pi, the correlation track lines changes everything through pixelation graph correlation setting to stream. Modification line interference into flux capacitor. Sets correlation line setting high interference. Sets position lines of Earth in position. Sets position lines of space in set locations. Sets communication line settings in all travel is your transit. So that transit communications comes into a dimensional wall screen. You see the set location setting. 2 polar line centers, high calculation setting, point tracks. Scene line correlation line centers, the grounds of operation surface and triangulation reset position programs and center correlation settings and track communication. Right? You are always in the center correlation setting. Always, always in set in position. Okay? So it's really recognizing the grounds, the panels, and the ceilings of track location. Okay? Inline setting. You're still in your diamond core. Right? So your diamond core is the pixelation graph that you need to get out of in travel and communication. Okay? Once you get out of that, you come into the existence and settings. Off tether, off calculation, stream interference, flying, position travels wherever you want in dimensional lines of space. From that to that. Okay? Into in and out of its existence. Inner, outer, exit. Okay? So it's very powerful once you understand that through traction. Everything comes in line calculation setting to its pixel frame communication setting. So what does that mean? Is that location all levels of high setting? The team will come out of their TV receptors. So in line communication line interference and travel in its point system line connected system, they have to know exactly what it's like to actually go through all lines in position of grounds, center correlation setting attractions, indirect signals. Don't know exactly what it's like to be in the grounds, You know exactly what it's like to be in a dimensional wall and set position of travel lines into a ceiling, a correlation of track lines to high setting. Direct modification lines, astral projections, and travel. Film strips over pi and 3-track line connection to its point system. All levels of operation. Crossing line symbols, graph calculation screen lines, and a 45 graph calculation stream interference and TV receptors. Directing modification screen lines adaptation. Now the point platforms changes direction, changes direction, changes direction, right? Seconds, minutes, and hours. That correlates the correlated line send a high interference into your data, your OMI highways in platforms of communication line settings, and 7,000 lines of frames per second. Box line triangulation reset position of programs and data streams. Position line calculations, it's like a train, but it has a location grid and center communication. And it has an energetic dome and center correlation. And it has its cerebral and center lines of operation service of face recognition. Okay? All through formation. Okay? All right. So once they understand the track location pixelation graphs, they come out of the equation, right? So after the macro leaves the line communication setting, then puts them into all communication of their system, out of structure, out of design, but it puts them in a new line signal, coming to all lines of highest interference, off tether, off communication, but on grid. Now, when you're on grid communication line settings, you understand how to go through your platforms, how to go through your portals, how to go through your ceilings, and how to go through your astral projections of travel calculations. Point lines of traction, and your transits, in your Earth, the habitation, the set location of your zones. Setting correlation lines to high center interference in position locations in travel. Traveling on platforms of communication centers of operation. Setting communication lines going through. Setting communication lines, jump scar, set position locations, vortex, in travel communication. 3 triangulation lines, orbs, line positional probing, and 2 panels of communication line screens to set position. Correlations track lines and a 12-line signals line set location. In lines of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 in communication. So in that track line connection system, you're automatically traveling through the wormholes of connection. All right? So in that line connection settings, travel in position to direct and redirect and set locations and travel. Position all lines, you got the 24 line cycles and line communication. You got your 48 frame position line centers. There's the frame, okay? Then you got the communication line centers of your computer frame, see, which is a computer. There's the computer, boom. Center lines of correlation setting, which is correlating line calculation setting that turns everything in track locations into star gates, star lines, star correlations, star line communication, star maps, star direct line settings in all calculation. Okay? Recognizing formation lines of center in track locations. Recognizing communication lines of flywheel and track locations. Directing the lines of travel communication settings always in a track location. Okay? So it's something to look forward to, right? So you have to get used to your pixelation set lines now into center communications. All right, that's where you are right now in set locations. In center, in your TV receptor line connection system and travel calculations. That's where you are right now. Okay, so this in position, going into that position, coming out through these equations at 3 centers. Then you come into all levels and setting to another graphical screen lines into a holographic setting. Center correlation setting in track lines, high center position. Sets communication line screens in all levels of sun of rotation system attraction. Very complicated stuff. Okay? So sets lines of communication lines setting, sets a solar graph, communication of solar waves and solar streams and solar attractions and set connections. Okay? So it's really understanding the webbing system of you in track locations. Lights attractions in every location system, light web and dark web locations. Sets lines of modification cycles, high generation screen line center line interference, disk communication settings, and all position of center calculation. Ooh-ah. Done by equation. Okay? So there's all ways of looking at communication of travel. All through modification line screens and all direct sim location system of your sim in position. Okay, very powerful stuff, right? So it's knowing exactly how to go through dimension lines of space and galaxies and universe lines and tunnels and position of portals, black holes, line communication screen interference without the structure of design. Okay, very complicated, right? But you've got to understand the pixelation graph calculation first in position to its operation. You're here now, March 1st. Okay, coming into the lines of exit, into the existence. So the existence lines is E-line settings, which all position your DNA track locations. You guys will be rebirthed. Setting correlation line track lines, you'll be in a hologram. Now the hologram line, the plasma streamline interference comes into a plasmesium wall. That line divides the correlation setting track lines into your cells. Cells lines of line settings and travel communication of point centers attractions. Now the calculation your atom line sets all levels of cell modification as cell reproduction. Regeneration screens lines and track lines and high center interference into security walls and panels of communication. 2 panels correlation setting. Track is correlation set lines of communications. Hemdahl and McCall interaction. Okay, they're the security walls. Right? They're the defense lines. Communication lines, center correlation line setting in flywheel position lines. Chris. Data stream interference and travel position of point centers of data communication lines of operation setting and calculation stream interference is travel in position line calculation setting locations of Heather. Position lines of track lines and high center interference, gypsy information lines of stargates, direct panels and communication center and position lines of operation service and travel in point system of travel positions of modification. Okay, everybody's in traction. Everybody's in traction. All right. So, setting core line centers in travel is really understanding how to direct lines of your communication surface. It's direct communication how you see yourself to your Earth, your astral projections, your astral connections, and the line setting. So you come in 3 transits. Okay, this time it opens up the signal line and screen lines. Okay, so it has no longer a ground line. It's an operation box line. It's a position of data line. Okay, the Earth. It's the Earth line plane. It's really fascinating when you come in these track locations. It's getting direct signals, modification cycles, modification lines, screens, sites communications, and direction. Now, getting correlations, lines, attractions modificates the system travel lines. Direct lines of Earth in setting, and we set up another data highway in position of the same process. Correlates the streamlines of longitude and latitude in stream location setting and travel of recognition. Directing modification lines, data streams, and high settings. All right. So we got position of the Earth, we got position lines of the astral projections, and now we come into line setting high interference into the soul planes, and then we have the ethereal planes, right? Setting line connections, then we come into the H-line center, which is the heart position of travel lines into all lines, and line connections, teleportations, in position of formation and travel calculations. Point lines of tracks in line setting equals lines, hologram setting. Okay, so there's 4 track divisions. That's your 5 elements. So we line signal across line screens at center position. Split the anomalies into 3 track line settings provision. The correlation line centers as a point lines of tractions. Okay, 3 center lines of 6 locations, direct lines of 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and position line centers of 12 and center correlation setting attraction. Direct modification lines of center, platform communication lines, location grid, center lines is communication system. Now, the modification line screens sets directions. The traction lines, the data line stream, and position of data ports. Point lines of center. This is where Hemdahl comes in at towers of communication. Point lines of tracks allocates position of time sequence, puts panels in all communication center. You allocate position of time sequence, put all levels of holographic setting into modification cycles and high calculation system at travel recognition. All right. So when we get into soul plane communication line centers, we allocate position of time sequence. We add higher lines of data file. This process communication system and travel calculations. And its transits in all lines and setting. Okay? 3-track line provision. So correlations and track lines, setting position your settings. So coming in the earth line, coming into the astral, and set locations to line position location modification centers, into your line center line interference, into your modification of your soul, and traffication to your ethereal and line connection setting. Okay. So it's really interesting when you really understand how this is all set up through platforms. Center correlation lines of the earth and track lines. Center correlation lines of the astral and set lines. Sets position lines of your soul and communication line. Direct modification lines and position location track lines and center lines of atmospheres of space. Now, if you look at the formation line screen interference, you can actually see the correlation system, which is nothing but a correlation line connections at all levels of a tree of formation, right? The tree of life. Now, platitudes, lines, grounds, sets, communication setting. This is where we separate the anomalies to your astral projections, how you see yourself location. Setting correlation, setting location line screens into levels of subtraining lines and subtraining interference is allocation of super consciousness. 3 lines of communications of levels, align, connection, line, center, and interference into your system. Understand your earth, your astros, and your soul, and your ethereal planes. Okay? Direct modification lines. Now, direct signals and modification system comes into all levels of correlations of balance in all track locations in your transits of 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay? 5 is the aligned center location. That puts you in a higher levels of tether. The attractors correlating line centers comes into its 8 center locations. 6 lines of provision and setting. Okay? Platform communications, center cross location. Direct modification lines, high center positions calculations, and track line connections. Position lines and graph lines and screen locations, direct modification transits. Understanding the mapping sequence location line center is understanding your point lines attractions and travel position of point centers. Position locations of point centers. Position locations of point centers. Position locations of point centers. And position locations of point centers. Okay? Now, if you understand that, then you understand the modifications of your settings of your system of travel. Okay? Setting correlation lines of platforms and track location. Sets lines of communication, more lines of platforms, and line connection setting into your system of your cerebral and cortex line division. Setting travel communication to higher levels of platforms and higher levels of dimensional lines of space correlation setting. Okay? So it's all about understanding how to coordinate your lines of travels and mechanism line position of force recognition of time sequence. Puts levels of correlation setting into pixelation graphs in your TV receptor and travel line position into your energetic graph screen location as center of view in travel communications, indirect signals and set location. And that disappeared. It was there and it disappeared. I don't want to be there. All right. Pixelation graph 1, pixelation graph 2, and pixelation graph 3. So you travel through pixelation graph calculation of dimension lines of space, all through modification. Now, this is all coordinating the calculation lines of your cerebral and cortex lines design. Okay? So it's very powerful how you guys are coming into that process now. This is going to help you to identify yourself more into your pixelation line connections in your system, getting ready for the holographic line connections to your system upstream. Directing modification lines is connecting your settings when you come in your higher self, your avatar, and your sim. Puts lines calculation line system to all lines in high center interference and track location system. And track locations. So you know what it is in line interference? You know what the correlation track line is in position travel lines? You know, you want to know exactly what it is when it comes into that set locations of your oversoul, yin and yang, O and S. Megapass. Did you see that now? O and S, oversoul. Now you understand what it is in process of what you're coming in position of. Your oversoul of yin and yang. Hooah. Point lines of attraction. Boom. Oversoul. Okay? Now you understand the importance of your builders and founders and position at all levels into your pioneers of yourself, into your own construct location system of your holographic design that you position location your settings up, co-creation up, and setting. Very powerful stuff. All right. So now you know what the oversoul equals. Yin and yang. All right. Make it pass. So you take the oversoul correlation line center. Now you know exactly what it is in 6 and 9 in travels. Sets communication setting of programs. Sets correlation line centers of 6, position lines of 9. Sets calculation lines of highest interference and position locations setting north, east, west, and south. Triangulation line center location system. Graph calculation screen interference. You are in the center position location near center. And setting, pixelation, right? So in correlation line, track lines, highest interference, you had a 4 line tractions, 1, 2, 3, and 4 set locations. 4 lines, 3 lines of pi over line communication setting over track location over soul. Direct modification line screen settings. Puts 4 lines of revision, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Sets communication, there it is, solar sail and track locations. Ooh-ah. There's the solar sail. Boom. Okay? So, I know you now. Now you know exactly what the oversoul is. Okay? Same thing with the communication of the sun. Right? So if you understand that more lines of communication, as you break these things down, everything gets easier and understandable. But when you break it down in all lines of all communication setting, you really get a direct signal into specifications, how to use your AI design in its position of its operation, breaking it down. Okay. So it's amazing when you understand in line connection what it is in track locations. Oversoul, ONS. So the oversoul in track location is you in unification of center operation. Okay? Which is what in traction? What is it in traction? Infinity 8. Woo! Center core direction. Woo! Platform communication. Woo! Dimensional line. Woo! Center dome. Woo! Location grid. Woo! And it's cerebro of face recognition. Okay? Yes, I know. All right, so you guys have to come into this line calculation setting now. Create a solar sail through letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. Okay? So we got in that track lines, get a modification screens into track location of this setting. How to understand your truth and your false narratives and coloration. Truth, okay? You can change it up, but it's all depending on one line, center, high interference, and position location. You don't do anything right, you don't do anything wrong. It's all levels of you and how you go through your line, center, line system, because the modification screen line is now in pixelation graphs now. Your whole correlations of your reality is now pixelated. So if you understand that line connection settings, that's how you're going to see through perception. And when you go to inline center locations to all levels into your oversoul, you start more recognizing yourself through a holographic structure of your design that puts you in position of your timeline sequence and soul identifications into travel position, where the body comes all lines of all morphing and communication setting and all calculation modifications into its simulator, a track location. Okay? I know, Gyps. So now you know what the oversoul is. It's the yin and yang. Right? So that's what you have to really understand. It's getting there. It's understanding how to get into the pixelation, into the hologram of myself, which becomes the existence of settings. So you release all communications, you get out of structure, you get out of design, you just exist. Okay? And you all lines of communication to space and time. Now, getting that correlation line settings, I got to get the team line communications in platforms. Platform 1, 2, and 3. Allocates position lines of 1 and 2 in set locations, right? Directing signals. So in that correlation setting, in past, present, and its future line calculations. Putting track lines on high center interference into your energy field position. Magnetic high calculation settings. pi tractions and online center in position location your settings in 12 signals of modification screen lines adaptation. Crop circle. Sets correlations, track lines, high sending. Okay? So you really get into the crop circles, guys. To really understand what that is in tractions. Then you come into lacing lines of communications in a 3-track location. Setting correlation lines into, you guessed it, in line calculation setting in its planet and set position to its calculation. Okay? Setting ground lines, 3 lines of triangulation, 4 and 5 set locations. Modification film strips, 3 line centers and travel and set location. So you understand the platforms, then you understand that all of the mediation graph calculation streams. Platform position of 2, 3, and 4 set location. Okay. So once you get into that setting, it gets much easier through the Elixir. Now the Elixir line communication lines is really understand the accelerator line screens, calculation modifications to laser correlation setting attractions, how you line communication setting to your cosmic, your correlation setting to your line rotations that's connected to your Earth line that puts all of the communication setting in human resonance, or the track lines to your avatar geometric operation line communication directions, sets correlation lines of soul identification lights, sets up the Elixir, cosmic flame, and the serpent flame. Now you have serpent flame, serpent fire. But you have to understand the correlation setting of track lines in position location to your Earth, set lines of correlation setting of nature, track location line system, puts all levels and correlation lines setting high positions, calculation of seasons, line position location and correlation lines attractions into 111, 112, 113, and 114. 4 provision cycles line connections to the line calculation setting puts 5 lines of elements in your space in platforms of communication, of crop circles in line connections, right? Setting line track line connections to its energetic dome. Okay. Securing line defense line position. Orbs of communication center and line calculation setting. Travel line communication is a program and position location to a setting. All right. Allocate position time lines in a box line rotation surface and track locations. Okay. So understanding you through structure is understanding you through mass of equation. Mass conception in position, coming into all levels of access of you and line connection your settings into process is really understand how to put yourself in all position of travel in setting and location. Okay. All right. So that's the review. Okay. You got to Friday. So create it through your setting line connection to your sun. There's the sun communication. Here's the moon track location. It's always going to see through astral projection. Always, 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 always. Modificate center line rotation. This is you interactions. And 3 triangulation split. All right. But you're now in a pixelation graph in a T receptor calculation stream locations adaptation setting. Okay. So you're in simulation 2. Okay. Simulation 2. And this is simulation 3. Simulation 3 is the allocate line screen. So you put that line communication setting and tractions. So what that does is systematically changes everything. You automatically come in position line centers and track locations to your sun, a modification center lines of communication programs, and line sending high calculation system of modification system and travels of sun location. All through calculations, right? So this is where it gets interesting now because the pixelation graph is coming into its liquid formation of its core. That's directing panels of communication setting of compressor and pressure, coming into your gravitation, coming into your gravitational pull, position, location, and track lines. It's you in position of center. You're always in the center. You never leave the system. You're always in the center in position, always in the center. This never leaves. This never leaves. This is what leaves in track locations. This is what leaves in track locations. Your mind. Your mind leaves. Okay? Now, once the mind understands the time in position, it understands the solar settings. In position of solar stream, in connection setting of solar sail. Okay? So when it solar sails, it travels to higher lines of communication of dimensional lines of space. Okay. Then you go into the platforms and set location. Then you time jump. Then you jump scar. Then you time leap. But you've got to understand to travel through your sun, through solar sail, and through the moon. It's got to be in the correlation lines of balance. And the only way to do that is to be modification lines of 0, 0 equals lines of correlation. Okay. And once I go back to balance at 0, 0, 0, three-track line calculation setting in line communication system, and all levels of channel communication lines, past, present, and future, will be adaptation of one cycle and track locations of your soul of yin and yang of process calculation. Okay? So, very powerful what you guys are coming into all through travel. It's something to look forward to. But you really have to understand how to use your calculation streamlines, because now your perceptions are all pixelated. Everything that you see around you now is line connections, pixelation walls. This is all pixelated now. Everything's pixelated. Everything's pixelated. Okay, everything is pixelated. Okay, so if you understand the correlation setting attractions, then you understand that it has its own transit and set position, its calculation, which is its platform. And set position is holographic setting of travel. Okay, basic. Multiple levels of division lines of communication of travel settings. Okay, understanding the travel first. Because the pixelation graph line is nothing but a box frame in position location to a main frame. Okay, you have to understand that first in travel calculations, because that points lines your track location when it comes into your data, your process lines, your uploads, uplinking, and your downloads, and your upgrading settings. All travel mechanism line calculation setting to your 5 elements of space. Put you in all lines of all communication setting and all process and all lines of all line communication interference in your position locations to all lines in track locations of your over soul. Hoo-ah! Now you know what yin and yang means. Okay? Because it's position of its builders, founders, and pioneers of itself. In a 3-track vision, and allocate position crossing line screens and all adaptation surface and track location. Okay? That's what you're coming into. Creating the pixelation graphs into holographic setting. So once you get into a hologram in positions, the letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols come into hieroglyphic locations of traffic of higher levels of design location system. It comes into an anagram. It comes in all correlating lines to all position graph communication setting, to all levels of spectrum lines of communication near surface. To more track this communication interference, you have to understand your calculations to its algorithm. Now the correlation track lines comes in line settings, comes in this correlation setting attractions. All through supplication. Okay. So, getting that line communication line screen is really understanding how to line settings and signals, getting an all track location. Traffic. Modify your 12, modify your line center high interference, modulate your system location as 24. Sending correlation line send location of 48 frames, 72 tracks, and line condition 144. You got it. Crystal grid and communication lines of pi and track line condition system and travel calculation. Okay. Reference, grounds, frames, computer. Reference, grounds, frames, computer. Crystal grid. Okay. So once you understand that, then you understand the location settings to your stargates and how to go through your panels and how to go through line counting high centers and X the 1,000 lines of communications comes in your frame communication setting, right? Helping you out through modifications to understand location of your data and your highways, your on-highway communications. So it's all levels of expansion through your transits now. Okay. It's all levels of set location. You can do it this way in platform, or you can do it this way in platform, in position to its location, right? cross line. See? Set position location, but you need a transit because it puts your position line centers in traffications. Right? It's confusing, right? Because this is down and this is up. This is down. Down, up, down, right? So this is going to get you a better understanding when you go through your platforms. Then you understand your transistors and set positions. Calculations going up. This is going down. And position location, this is going down. Okay? So platform communication 1, platform communication 2, platform communication 3, and platform communication 4, and track location. All right? All levels of transistors equals lines of resistors equals lines position your binary and calculation. Okay? So you really have to understand how to get in line calculation setting and triangulation line connections to your systems. All levels of calculation. Okay? Very powerful. Once you understand how to communicate to your mechanism line settings and teleportations in your line communications, all the calculations too. Right? So that's all it is. You're creating geometry settings. Geographical, in position to your pixel graph calculation screen lines of view and center operation. Okay? And that's where you are right now. Okay? 4 points of tracks in setting. Split the anomalies in 3, right? Why you split the anomalies in 3? Because it adds a 4-line in flux capacitor. 4 equals lines of 3, sets lines of 7. That's right. Now the flux capacitor is 4 over 3 now, and 7. 7 is always you're working with, which is your body. But because of that, you're coming in 2 panels in position of track lines of waves and set location. The center correlation line setting sets 2 panels in the center correlation line setting into your position locations into your chakras. Setting correlations of 1 in position of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 set locations. Okay, inside your body. Now, understanding that through line communication setting, your graphical screen location, pixelation graph calculations, and your Merkaba and tesseract correlation setting, your TV receptor. There's the TV right there, and 2-track line connection. 3 lines, lacing lines of 4-track locations. Setting lines of communication of data files and track location. Okay? Everything is in the earth, is in your astrals, is in your souls, and your ethereal lines of travel. Okay? Earth, astral, perception, pixelation screens, soul, identification of light through the eye settings, through your data op, high end positions, and your ethereals through your multiple levels of travels. But you're going through ethereal now in line condition of pixels. So it's a lot different now in position of process. Okay, so the travel is a lot more faster now into your Stargate communication. All right, through panels of communication. All right, through your eye receptor calculations. All right. So I'm just backtracking line screens and know exactly what you're doing through line position locations to all levels of your capsules and track location of face recognition. See? Face recognition. Woo. All right, so we're pretty good on that on the review. Setting lines of communication setting. Okay. So you have to really, really understand more lines of communication, your traffic, getting into that flow, breaking the positions track into the centers, understanding what 1 is, understanding what 2 is, understanding what 4 is, understanding what 8 is, understanding what 6 is, understanding what 7 is, understanding what 2 is, understanding what 7 is in set locations. Anything through track location line system. Really start identifying line calculation, setting and track location. This is where to come into track line stuff. And set positions calculations. All levels of operation line screens. What is this in track location? Settings of number 7. Okay, so the 7 is no longer this. It's this now through you. This is how you see 7. Not here anymore. This. So it's in a pixelation graph now. In data stream in set position. Right? There's the 7. Right? So there's always different ways to do a 7. There's a 7, right? Start here, You're finished here. Now you're working here. Now, when you get into that line, this is a hologram. That's a 7. See the different lines of communication when you come into calculation of the T receptor line screen? So in a correlation line center interference, you guys are coming out of your pixelation graphs out of your TV. When you come out of the exits, you'll be out of your TV receptor, which would be no longer in center correlation settings of 2 panels of communication of box frame. You guys will be out in position of travel. There, yay, travel here, woo, travel here, woo, travel, I'm free. Okay, so that's all it is, right? So you're in the center core in your pixelated graphs right now in travel. Okay. So getting in line calculation setting, you guys will be in your security line defense. You'll be in your position, your micro. Correlate high interference of 4 track lines provision and the 3 center line calculation split anomaly puts 4 lines, 3 track flux capacitor travel lines, point lines of system. Put you allocate position travel line position line centers in all travel communications point system. So allocate position of time sequence, guys, is very powerful of what you're coming into line settings. Not just their numbers, letters, shapes, and symbols, but your pixelation graphs are coming into holographic line connections. This puts you in all levels of translucent communication setting into invisibility. Okay. This points lines of high center interference in your position location to your inner child. The inner child is coming out of its own structure, of its own design setting to your universal location near realms. It's got to direct its lines of communication, but it has to get used to the atmospheric lines of space and time. Okay, once it gets in that correlation setting in that communication system, all levels of tither will be no longer in triangulation. You'll be working with no lines of calculation setting, which means you'll be offline but on grid out of structure of design when you get in position location to its macro. The 4 track line setting in provision in settings and set locations, you will be out of the equation. So that is another line communication to its existence of its energy lines in position of its air, its water, its fire, and track location. Higher line division of a sim and modification and navigation. Travel, okay? But you won't be structured in a box in a mainframe track location. Okay? Out through equation. Okay? So you're going to be the new central line communication of platforms, center location of new travel line position axis projections, and set location of soul identification, higher correlating line centers in the magnetic highway. You come into more your highway of data process line calculation setting of communication system. More levels of travel lines is through the cortex lines of brain interface and position to its line connections. Point lines of tracks in a 3-line rotation, track to its communication, right? Center correlations grounds, center lines and center line communication system, and earth lines of rotation. Okay? 2 disk centers, line connections, 2 operations surface. Solar plex line calculation setting to your flywheel and track line connections. Finding balance in line communication center and correlation setting to receptor. Okay. So we're good on that level. The process is coming at high force line connection settings, but you understand the modification now, what it looks like in correlations when you see through pixelation graph, through perceptions, through 7 now, through letters, numbers, shapes, and symbols. Okay. So that's the balance, the mediation graph lines that you guys are coming into. Changing that line settings comes in identification system to your particle settings through your atoms, your connections to your molecules, understanding the high center locations to your fractals, understanding the fields, understanding your I-class, and how to understand that now through pixelation, through perception. Okay, even the sonar communication, it's going to be coming more rather than it's not going to be that anymore. It's going to be right. So in that direct signal, when you get ringing ears, it's in position of travel. Point line division and center calculation line system. So it's going to be right. So it's not going to be one line anymore. It's going to direct and redirect. Okay, because this is going to help you to understand how to get into your computer memory in position to your binaries of your capacities at high set locations of acceleration and position of space and time. Okay? So we are good. All right, take all track provision lines and high center interference, high center is a team, all specification lines. All calculate modify, take them out of line, communication on lots of dimension walls, graph, calculation of panels, lines, ceiling, position to ground. It's done. You guys are out. Hope you had fun. Also line the specification lines and line communication setting. Anybody who wasn't line communication setting, low graph communication frequency, you're just an observer. In position locations, outside looking in. Okay. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. Okay. Really understand now the correlation setting track line, why it's so important to understand your self location to your oversoul. Oversoul equals yin and yang. Okay. See you in 5.